Hello, everyone. Professor Rios here. Hope you're doing well. This little presentation is a bit of a departure from normal, sort of giving you a geographical point of view or perspective about the Ukraine, given that it is so in the news these days. It isn't something I would do specific to a country, but it's important for the chapters that are coming up, Europe and Eurasia. So definitely worth at least discussing. So with that, I'm going to keep it short. It's not going to be particularly long, just to at least get you to think about the area more geographically. Um, this is not meant to be a geopolitical analysis. I will mention some aspects of geopolitics. This is not a political science or politics discussion, the right or wrong of what's going on. It's just to give you sort of a geolocation viewpoint on what's going on. So, first, let's zoom out and you actually see the enormity of Russia. So, Russia is the biggest country in the world, extending all the way from the Pacific Ocean, the Bering Strait, basically facing Alaska, through Siberia, through basically the biggest expanse of pine needle forests on Earth called the taiga, all the way through basically westernmost Russia, which then borders places like the Ukraine, Belarus, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. These are former Soviet satellites or provinces, or however you want to address them. They belong to the Soviet Union, just like Russia was part of the Soviet Union. And this basically stripe, this area comprised of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, and the Ukraine, function essentially as a border between Russia and Europe. So it's both European and Eurasian at the same time. If you zoom into the Ukraine a little bit more, you will see that it's a pretty good sized country. It is roughly about twice the size of New York State, or think of it as New York State and a big chunk of New England, if you want to think of it in terms of size. The Ukraine has this area to the far south called Crimea, which essentially has been part of Russia since 2014 when the Sochi Olympics, which were held in the city of Sochi right here in these mountains in 2014, 2 weeks after those games ended, Russia basically took over the Crimean Peninsula. There is a port here called Sevastopol. It is a naval port which grants Russia access through the Black Sea into the Mediterranean and eventually the Atlantic. This would be Russia's one and only warm water port. And this has been really theirs, even though if you look at the border on Google Maps, on Google Earth, see is a dash line, meaning it isn't officially recognized by the United Nations. Now, if you look at the Ukraine from the perspective of its border with Russia, so let's look at eastern Ukraine, this border here, many people who live in this portion of the Ukraine are of Russian background. Because when the Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, basically many Russian heritage people moved there, just like they moved to Belarus and Lithuania and Kazakhstan and other such places. So there's a lot of Russian background here. It would be similar to what is currently the case in upstate New York or extreme northern Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. There's a lot of people who have family in Canada. So before borders were such a big deal in terms of security, you could just simply go across the border from the New York into Canada, Canada into New York, and it really wasn't that big a deal. So there's a lot of family members who would live on the other side. Well, it's something similar in this region here. The further west you go towards Moldova and Romania and Hungary and Slovakia and Poland, the less Russian the area is. So again, because of where it is, this is a much more agriculturally fertile region in this part of the world. The climate can be very, very cold, but it's not as cold as when you head further east into what's Russia and eventually Siberia. The whole issue going on, at least as of this 2022 conflict between the Ukrainians and the Russians, is in some political respects all tied to the fact that Russia, Putin, fears Western incursions into his border. Again, agree with him, disagree with him, not my point here. It's just sort of like a mindset. And he sees the opportunity to basically annex more land into basically his own. This region is crisscrossed with gas pipes, gas line, basically, natural gas. And Russia, through either the Ukraine or other regions, really provides a lot of natural gas to places like Germany and Poland and such places. So there is sort of an economic tie here as well. And the Ukraine isn't part of NATO, the North American Treaty Organization, which from our perspective, and by our, I mean the United States, for example, there is an article in the NATO charter that says if one country attacks a member of NATO, it is considered an attack on all countries of NATO. So, for example, if the Ukraine were part of NATO, which it isn't, and Russia attacked it because they did, we, along with, Germany and France and Italy and the United Kingdom, would have to basically come to their defense. So right now we're providing aid in the form of whether it's weapons, there's a lot of economic sanctions going on. And so that's obviously a very complicated political scheme going on. But I did want to at least give you a sense of where the Ukraine is. Again, simply because if you give a generic American a map of the world and tell them to point to where the Ukraine is, I would be willing to bet the grand majority would not even know where to go without looking it up on Google. So it's right there. Again, here's Russia, here's Europe, and here's the Ukraine, literally stuck in the middle. You can think of this whole region, again, the Ukraine, Belarus, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, as sort of a wall that separates Russia, Eurasia, from Europe. And bridges are complicated things in geography. I think we talked about in this class Turkey, how it is a bridge between the Middle East and Europe, and how it pretty much found itself stuck in the middle when the whole Syrian mess back in 2015 and 2016 sort of got going. Bridges can be complicated in geography. They tend to be points of funneling, whether it's people or events or sometimes good things, obviously, but oftentimes not. Where this is headed, who knows? Is this going to be a long, protracted event? The weather is getting warmer in the region, right? We're headed towards spring in this northern hemisphere, winter into spring 2022. And as this becomes warmer, all that frozen ground begins to thaw and it becomes a muddy mess. So that can be problematic from the perspective of either an occupying force or Ukrainian forces reacting and interacting with Russia. Very, very complicated. It is clearly having an effect on not just our economy, but the global economy. With gas prices. So you can see the connectedness of everything, how one event far, far away can have repercussions down the line. So that's where I'm going to leave it. Again, it's a lot more complicated. This little video is meant to be sort of a bit of an addition to the European video and also the Eurasian video, simply because I just wanted you to focus a little bit more on what's happening in a place that I'm guessing a few weeks ago, many people didn't even realize either existed or cared about it or whatever the case might be. So, anyway, having said that, if you have any issues or questions, please send them my way. Again, this ties into both week 8 and week 9 of the World Regional Geography course. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I hope you're doing well, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.